Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of whether the Dark Phoenix movie actually fixes a major X-Men timeline issue. This is so cool. So I did a video about a month ago on the full X-Men timeline, including Legion and Gifted. And man, I want to thank everybody that replied to that video. You all gave me so much good feedback. We're going to talk about some of the smaller tweaks people suggested, but also a major item that was mentioned in the comments. So man, thank you all. So as usual, I will try to avoid any major spoilers, but I do have to talk about some aspects of the movie to discuss the timeline. But as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a May contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option in case you want to help me with my goal of doing this full time one day. But honestly, no matter how you support the channel, it's all greatly appreciated. Leaving comments, liking videos, and subscribing, those things go a long way too. So thank you so much. So in that X-Men video, which you can check out if you want, I went over this timeline here. So you can go watch the video for all the details behind it, but we're just going to talk about a few tweaks to this timeline. So we're going to go over the small ones first and then the big one that I think you're going to love. Okay, so one thing people just pointed out that I forgot to mention the Apocalypse flashbacks, because I did a section on all the different flashbacks, and I'm so sorry, Apocalypse. How could I forget you? Here we see him building the pyramids, and I'm listing that as pre-3600 BCE because we don't know exactly when it happens, and this is from Days of Future Past. Then in the Apocalypse movie itself, it opens right up with him being betrayed in the opening scene, and they give us 3600 BCE. Of course, there is a very buff Oscar Isaac transferring his essence over into a new form and then getting trapped in the pyramid. And that's, of course, the opening scene of the movie. So anyway, I forgot that flashback. Very sorry. Want to make sure to mention that right up front. Also, there was a lot of discussion about the New Mutants timeline. I picked 2017 for it, and of all the things I mentioned to back that up, somebody mentioned this article that I forgot about. This is an article by Josh Boone, or mentioning Josh Boone, and he was asked, when does the movie take place? And he answered it really specifically. It takes place present day. And keep in mind, this article was written in 2017. New Mutants was supposed to come out in early 2018, in between Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. Of course, New Mutants got delayed and didn't come out till 2020. But 2017 makes sense for the date because we did see a calendar that indicated 2017 in the movie. But most importantly is it needs to be between Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. So just wanted to mention this article. It helps confirm that 2017 is a good placement. So this was a really interesting point somebody made. In my timeline, I put Logan in the third revised timeline because as we learned in the video, many revisions to the timeline due to time travel. But somebody said, hey, how's that possible? Because in Deadpool 2, it starts with him, we'll just say, making fun of an aspect of Logan to avoid any spoilers. So he can't do that if it isn't in the second timeline. So the suggestion was, no, you got to move it up here. It's got to be in the same timeline as the beginning of Deadpool 2 because, again, he kind of clowns on something that happens in it. Then Cable comes from the future and goes back to 2018 and rewrites the timeline. So then the question is, okay, what exactly got rewritten? What did that mean? Now, remember, we learned from the bigger X-Men video that there were tons of Easter eggs for Mr. Sinister. We had them in the Apocalypse movie. We had them in New Mutants. We had them in Deadpool 2, and we had them in Logan. So all the different movies had all these teases for it. Well, if Cable came back and rewrote time in 2018, maybe Logan didn't happen. Maybe Mr. Sinister's plans were foiled. Transition didn't happen, etc., etc. I kind of like that idea. I kind of like the idea of the third timeline being wide open so that Deadpool and Wolverine can fit right in there. And I'm putting it in 2023 because in one of the trailers, he mentions it's been 5 years. Well, he said 5 years ago, you'd all be dead, which of course was referring to something that happens in Deadpool 2. But bottom line is Deadpool and Wolverine looks like 2023. So I really like this. I think this makes a lot of sense. Now, I did have somebody say, wait, we've already seen in the trailers, they're revisiting stuff from Logan. So if it's only in the second timeline, which was reset, how can they do that? And that's a good question, but then also keep in mind in Deadpool 2, he goes back to X-Men Origins Wolverine and kills the crappy Deadpool. So I'm beginning to think these are branches and they didn't rewrite time. Even if the characters perceived it that way, I think that it was probably creating a backup branch or something, because I'm going to bet in Deadpool and Wolverine with the TVA, we're going to see that all of these timelines do still exist. So I like this. I think this makes sense. Let me know your thoughts on Logan being in the second timeline. Then I'm going to take the L on this one. This is my last little tweak to the timeline, but oh man. So I had mentioned how a behind-the-scenes video showed us 2054 for when Cable was in the future. This isn't in the movie, it's only in behind the scenes, but it seems pretty clear the intent was 2054. But I said, nah, that doesn't work though, because Deadpool says, I bet 50 years from now we're bestest buddies, and Cable's like, 50 years from now you're very dead. So I was like, see, that can't work. I think there was at least 10, maybe 12 or 13 people that went, dude, if he's dead in 2054, he would still be dead in 2068. This totally works. You can make it 2054, not 2068. Oh man, that's really funny. I'm going to take the L. So yeah, we're going to go 2054. That seems to be what they intended. And, adding 50 and going with 2068 makes sense if you hadn't seen that behind the scenes clip. But no, now that we know it, I'm going to go with 2054, and I'm sorry that I didn't go with it to begin with. That's really funny. Okay, now for the main event. What is it about Dark Phoenix that fixes this little mess that we have with Origins Wolverine and the original trilogy? So as a reminder of what the mess is, I'm sure everybody remembers, right? But just really quickly, X-Men Origins Wolverine, the end of the movie, I believe is firmly placed in 1979 because they head to 3 Mile Island. Notice it's still active. The nuclear reaction or nuclear issue there, the incident, if you will, has not occurred. And in fact, it does not occur until March in the real world of 1979. So I think in the X-Men universe, the incident at 3 Mile Island was caused by the end of X-Men Origins Wolverine, the big battle with Deadpool, etc. So the movie ends in 1979. Therefore, it starts in 1973 because we're 6 years earlier, if you remember. And of course, Days of Future Past resets things in 1973, January of 1973 to be specific. So, we know all that, right? Keep all those things in mind. Now let's talk about the issue with the 15-year line, right? So here's the problem. In the original trilogy, twice they said the not too distant future. This is the first X-Men movie, and this is Last Stand. So that would make you think we're in the 2000s because these movies came out in the 2000s. However, in the first X-Men movie, it's been 15 years since Logan lost his memory, and in X2, they repeat it, 15 years since he lost his memory. And of course, Last Stand, we see that Logan is trying to convince Cyclops to move on from the events that happened in X2, and Cyclops says, not everybody heals as fast as you, Logan. So there's clearly been a decent amount of time between X2 and Last Stand. It's undetermined, but there's been some time where Cyclops maybe should have gotten over some things that happened. Okay, so let's look at this in a nice picture here, right? We have X-Men Origins Wolverine starts in 1973 over on the far left. We have 6 years before we get to 1979. We then have the wonderful 15 years line. Then we have X-Men, the first movie and the second movie, both of which have that 15 years line. And then we have Last Stand, which seems to be, several years, but it's unclear how many. And then we have the issue, not too distant future. So these two do not match. You cannot have them in the not too distant future, but also only be 15 years after X-Men Origins Wolverine. So I chose the 2000s route. A lot of people do that, but others have chosen, putting the original trilogy in the 90s sometime. But we actually have an official answer. Who knew? Who knew the Dark Phoenix solved this? Okay, so we have to look at the 2 Jean Grey flashbacks. The first one is in The Last Stand. They don't tell us too much here. We just know Professor X is showing up. It was 20 years before The Last Stand, and that's when he meets and brings Jean Grey, a young Jean Grey, to the X-Mansion. We don't know how old she is here, although, you can kind of guess she's a teenager maybe by her look. But if you do check on the age of the actress in real life playing in the scene, she's 13. So kind of keep that in mind. But the bottom line is they don't give us a year for this, and they don't tell us how old she is. On the other hand, Dark Phoenix, good old Dark Phoenix, saved the day, gives us not only the year, 1975, but it shows us a young Jean Grey, right? And she's in the car accident, and that leads to Professor X, now, finding her and bringing her to the X-Mansion. But here's the key. She tells us she was 8 years old. So we know 2 things we didn't know about the original flashback. This time we know the year it happens and her age. Okay, so, and here's the 2 genes, as you can see there. So the one on the left is 8. We know, because she says that in the movie. And the one on the right, at least the actress is 13. And I could accept that, right? I mean, the one on the left looks under 10, certainly. And the one on the right looks like a very young teenager. Okay, great. So, what's the key here? Well, Eric Casper Dude, you're the man. I hope you're watching this video. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because Eric said, hey, go check out this video by a gentleman named Jake. They made about 2 years ago on how to fix the X-Men timeline, and in particular, how to fix that 15 years. So you can check out his video if you'd like, but I'm going to go over the information he basically goes over as well. But thank you, Jake, for your video, dude. You rock. And thank you, Eric, for pointing this out. Okay, so let's add in the flashbacks to this timeline here. We'll first add in the one from the original timeline. That's when Professor X, played by Patrick Stewart, got a young Jean Grey. I'm putting 1986 because that's 20 years earlier than where I currently have The Last Stand in 2006. Then Days of Future Past resets the timeline, but both Origins Wolverine and Days of Future Past start in 1973. And then, of course, in 1975, we know that young Jean Grey is 8 years old. Now, honestly, I thought, oh, this doesn't tell us much, though, because this is the new timeline. How does this impact the original timeline? Well, this is what I didn't process, but it makes so much sense. She was born before the timelines were reset. In fact, if you do the math, she would have been born anywhere between 1966 and 1967. I say that because we don't know what her birthday is. We only know she's 8. So she may have just turned 8 like yesterday, or she may be turning 9 tomorrow. So there's a full year range where she could have been born. And that would be 1966 to 1967, anywhere in that range. That's before the timeline was reset. So we can use when she was born to actually figure out when that original flashback was. This one here. We can figure it out because we know a couple things. We know the actress was 13, which is just a guess, right? We don't know what her official age in the movie was, but this gives us a rough idea. So then if we say, okay, if she was born between 1966 and 1967, I'm going to go with 1966, and you'll see why in a minute, but that puts us in 1979. Wild. Okay, so we've got an official year, no longer a guess. Now, why is 1979 so important? Look at this. So the first X-Men movie has a line that really didn't make much sense when it was in 1986, but now makes perfect sense because Professor X is saying Cyclops, Storm, and Jean were some of my first students. Well, let's see now if this fits. Okay. X-Men Origins Wolverine, right? Professor X shows up, says you're safe now, and look who's there, Cyclops. Now, we don't see Storm for the record, but we do see Cyclops. Then, now that other flashback is in 1979, that means Cyclops in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Professor X got him in 1979, and Jean Grey in 1979 as well. 2 of his original students. Oh my word, that's so perfect, right? And then we can only assume Storm, we just didn't see it happening, but that she was also in the 1979 timeframe. I love it. Okay, so now that we've got this in 1979, we can go to X-Men The Last Stand, move that to 20 years since 1979, so we're now in 1999. And then we can look at both X-Men and X-Men X2, X-Men United, and we can put those 15 years after 1979 because it fits really well. Oh my word. I love that. It is so cool. I really think that fixes everything. I still don't like a big gap between X2 and The Last Stand, but honestly, grief takes a long time to get over. It could take Cyclops 5 years, Plus, some of these can be moved around slightly. The 20 years, for example, doesn't have to be exactly 20 years. It could be 19 and a half. There are ways to maybe make X-Men Last Stand move to 1998, for example, but I'm just going to leave it like this. I think this works so perfectly and solves so many major issues. Let me know your thoughts. But I think now we can go back to this timeline, move these back, and celebrate. Oh, my word. I absolutely love that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on all these different tweaks. Moving Logan, changing Deadpool 2 to 2054, etc. Let me know your thoughts on all of this, but especially on whether or not you think now we actually have concrete proof that the original trilogy was in 1994 and 1999. I love it. So, as always, I want to mention my Google timeline sheet. It's out there on my Google Doc. I will leave a pinned comment so you can go out and find it. Notice it's sorted by default by timeline, year, and month, but you can sort by however you want, including release order. You can also filter by creating either a temporary view or you can just download the file and do whatever with it. And one of the filters you can do is by Xverse. And if you filter by Xverse, there's the X-Men timeline. And notice I now have X-Men, X-Men United, and Last Stand moved back to 94 and 99. So, again, let me know your feedback. I would love to hear it. Also, don't forget, make contest, be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steel book, and of course, that membership option if you're interested in that. Also, I will leave a pinned comment in case you would like to join the Discord. We do so much fun stuff on the Discord. Notice here we're doing rewatches. Here's more watch parties. Lots of fun. MMORPG, everybody really enjoys that. We have Star Wars retrospectives. Those will continue on. We have a thumbnail contest. We know my thumbnails are not that great. So you can help design one for an upcoming Moon Girl video. And lastly, we mostly talk about Star Wars, DC, and Marvel. But honestly, in the other media, we can create a thread and you can talk about whatever you want. 1,300 members across the globe, 24/7 conversations going on. We would love to have you join us. So again, look for a pinned comment and you can be part of the Discord. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.